right. Let me share my screen. We can get started. So welcome everyone. My name is Kenneth Ellington. I'm the founder and CEO of Ellington Cyber Academy. And for today's session, we're going to be going over how to use Microsoft Sentinel, what is Azure fundamentals, and basic overview of a Microsoft Sentinel environment. This is not meant to be a full entire program, because I can't teach you everything within an hour period. But this is designed to give you a general overview of how it works, so you're able to explore deeper on your own time. If you want to join our program, we're able to help you with that as well. So about this, class session today for this webinar, it's a hands-on lab. So if you already have Microsoft Sentinel set up, you can follow along. If not, this is being recorded, and you'll have the recording through the newsletter and through our YouTube channel, probably sometime this week. You have hands-on projects and lab and practice problems for this. And if you join our actual program, you'll have the detailed modules and guidelines on this as well. Start one. Yep, go. Cool. So who the heck am I, right? My name is Kenneth Ellington. I'm a senior cybersecurity consultant at a Big Four accounting firm. I'm a cybersecurity practitioner that specializes in similar technologies. So think of Splunk, Microsoft Sentinel, LogScale, XSOAR, things of that nature. I was a part-time cybersecurity instructor at the University of Houston, but I stopped doing that to focus on the business full-time. And I'm also a Blue Team program instructor for Blacks in cybersecurity. And one interesting fact about me, I'm a huge My Hero Academia fan, for any of you that watch anime. And then Courtney is my co-instructor. She's also my apprentice. She is a SOC specialist at Expel. So she focuses on phishing techniques and mitigating those for various firms. So she'll be answering any questions or concerns you may have to put in the chat, and we'll either answer it during the session or after the session for a Q&A part. But any questions before we get started? Chat. Nope.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. So what exactly is the cloud? This is one of the things I don't think people fully understand what the cloud is. I guess a lot of marketing money goes inside of it, so people think it's like a magical box. That's not really how it works, right? All it is basically it's access resources from servers or computers, right? So a firm or private entity will have access resources, right? Let's say they have 100 servers, but they only use the computing power of only 50 of them. They'll then sell off that excess compute power towards other clients or the users that may need it to run different applications, to build those devices, to run virtual machines, do infrastructure projects, or wherever the case may be. That is the cloud, right? The cloud is basically a grouping of someone else's servers, right? Or yours, and you're using that excess compute power to run different projects, basically. So some of the public cloud providers are AWS or Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, then Google Cloud. A quick tip, if you're trying to get inside the cloud and go down that career path, choose one of these platforms to learn. These are the 3 most popular ones. Please do not try to learn all of them. That's one of the common issues that I see when I interview people, is they'll have a year worth of experience and they'll say they know all 3 of these platforms. I'm thinking, how is that possible? I try to ask them simple questions about it and they're not able to answer it. So if the firm you want to work for is AWS, then learn AWS. And if the firm you want to work for uses Azure, let's say you're Microsoft, then learn Azure. Same thing if you're using Google Cloud. But don't try to learn all 3 of them at the same time. So there's a couple of different cloud deployment models I want to go over real quick. These are the 4 basic ones. So you have a public cloud, a private cloud, a hybrid cloud, and a multi-cloud. A public cloud, think of the 3 ones I just mentioned. So Google Cloud, AWS, and Microsoft Azure. These are computing resources that are public facing, and anybody can basically purchase them. So me, you, your grandma, your mom, your dad, grandpa, doesn't matter. You can basically go online, create an account, and purchase these ones. A private cloud is one that those resources are hosted in your own data center, and they're private towards you. So you're the only one that has access towards those resources. Then you have a hybrid cloud. A hybrid cloud combines both the public cloud and the private cloud. So you may have half your servers only accessible to you, and you may have the other half accessible towards the public, right? And then another cloud common deployment model is a multi-cloud environment. Most large organizations will have this, and this is basically where you have multiple cloud providers and environments for your computing needs. So, for example, let's say you have Microsoft Azure, and then you have AWS. You may use Microsoft Azure because it has better security protocols and security tool sets that you might want to use. For example, you're using Microsoft Sentinel, right? And then you have, for your infrastructure needs, you might think AWS is better for what you're trying to do. If you have both of them, that is a multi-cloud environment. And that's what most large organizations will have for their needs. There's pros and cons towards it. Some of the pros of it is it gives you more coverage. You're not pigeonholed into using one provider. So if something goes wrong with them, you still have coverage for your other needs. Some of the cons with it is if you're not careful and you don't know how to properly configure or manage one cloud environment, adding on towards another one will cause a lot of issues with your security team or your overall IT department. So you need to be careful when you're doing it. In my experience, most firms aren't. They don't fully use the first cloud environment, so they try to add on to the second one, and it causes issues for them. Something to be on the lookout for. Because you work for any decent sized organization, they'll probably have more than one cloud environment, from my experience. Any questions? No. All right, let's continue. Oh, we have a question. No, so far so good. So now we're gonna get inside the Azure section. And for the actual constructor-led program, it's broken up into larger parts. I just kind of condense it to make it quicker because it's only an hour session at the most. And if you do AWS or you do Google Cloud, they have the same exact concepts, right? They're just named something different. I think in AWS they're called availability zones as well. I think they're called AWS regional pairs or something like that, but same concepts. This is a different name conventions. But specifically for Azure, you have Azure regions, regional pairs, and availability zones. So Azure regions, think of those as you have the US West region, US Central, US East, US South, for example. These are basically just grouping the data centers across different geographical regions designed to give different robust computing features, right? So the Azure West region may have a lot of SaaS security tools, for example, and they may host that on those data centers in that region. Compare it towards, let's say, Azure US East region, which may have better infrastructure costs, right? So firms can pick and choose which regions they want to actually host the services in. Given the different compliance purposes and costs, they'll have to figure out how that's going to work, but they're able to do that. And then you'll have Azure regional pairs. So these are two separate Azure regions working in tandem to provide computing resources towards their customers. What that means is, let's say you have Azure regional US West and then US East. Those two regions may work together to try to provide different services for their clients. Because US West may not have the best infrastructure tool set, for example, and then US East might not have the best security tool sets, for example. So a client may use a regional pair to get the best of both worlds. Then you have availability zone. These are individual data centers in Azure regions that are normally used for fault tolerance. So if you're a multinational company or just domestically a large company in the US, you don't want to put all of your tool sets inside of one region. for data centers, right? Because, for example, there is a hurricane in, I think, California, San Diego, LA area. There's a lot of flooding. So if one of your servers or one of your data center gets flooded, and then if all of your data is on that server center, and you lose it, that's not good, right? Or again, same thing with the features, right? You may have certain features inside of certain regions, and so you want to be able to have the ability to use different availability zones for those needs. So kind of fault tolerance, disaster recovery, which is very important, right? You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, basically. Because something happens, now it's a disaster, war, some political crisis happens in one region, your server gets destroyed, that's not good for your company. So just kind of mitigating risk, basically. Any questions?
All good from the chat as well.
Got you. Actually, quick question towards the group. Who here has cloud experience?
We actually don't have any questions from the chat, but there is a statement by Quinian.
When? Yeah, so
Yeah.
yes, very, very astute as always, Quinn. That is the case. So for compliance purposes, right? For example, the US has different data privacy laws compared to Europe, right? So for a lot of, let's say, financial or government entities, they're only allowed to keep data inside of our country, and if they move it overseas, there's a lot of regulatory reasons they may have to pay extra fines or something like that, right? So firms are very careful and cautious as to where data is being stored and where data is being moved, right? That's one reason costs may rise if you're using a purely cloud environment, right? Because you may not be able to get the cheapest rates because your data may not be able to be stored in that area. Well, that's why the cloud isn't as cheap as it may seem. But for another Azure concept, you have Azure resourcing groups. So what are Azure resourcing groups? So Azure resources are basically digitally manageable assets inside of Azure. So think of a log, analytics workspace, a virtual machine or VM, technically an on-prem server that you connected Azure Arc to, storage accounts, databases, things of that nature. And then Azure Resource Group is a container that contains similar resources that firms may want to manage as a group for security reasons or cost management reasons. And then now we're going to head to what is Microsoft Sentinel. So if you want to use Microsoft Sentinel or any cloud native SIEM, you need to understand the fundamental cloud pieces that it sits on first. So a cloud native SIEM is a SIEM that was specifically designed to run in the cloud, right? A quick question towards the audience. Is Splunk a cloud native SIEM? Put your answer in the chat and I'll see what you guys say.
And let's go ahead and repeat the question. I think Felicia said she didn't hear the question.
Sure thing. My question was, is Splunk a cloud native SIEM? Yes or no? Okay, let's see. So we got Court. So what do you think? Is Splunk a cloud native SIEM?
You said is Splunk a cloud native SIEM?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
All right. See that? Okay. So the answer is actually no. Splunk is designed to run on-prem. That's what it was built to do. Now, granted, it can run in the cloud, but it's not designed to run in the cloud. That's why when you try to fully run Splunk on a full cloud environment, it doesn't work as well as if you would have it on-prem. And you run into a lot of cost and licensing issues if you try to run it that way. Splunk does have a cloud service called Splunk Cloud. But again, the way they designed it is kind of funky. It's not the best. If you want to use a cloud SIEM, because again, the way the software was designed to run and built, it's meant to run on premises for the most part. But Splunk does have a cloud version called Splunk Cloud. So the reason Microsoft Sentinel is a cloud native SIEM is Microsoft Sentinel is basically a SaaS service. So it's a software as a service. So Microsoft will handle basically all of the infrastructure costs and all of the actual infrastructure to run the SIEM, and you just basically pay for that service. So in that sense, it runs basically like any SIEM environment. You can collect logs from different endpoints. You can build correlation rules on it, detection rules. You can monitor your environment. So it works like that for any basic SIEM environment. And I should put this. So probably the reason firms would like to use Microsoft Sentinel, and I feel this is true for most Microsoft products, is that most firms have Microsoft products, right? They have a Windows machine. They'll use Teams, right? They'll use Skype. They'll use 365, right? Or 365. And so Microsoft Sentinel works very well within the Microsoft security stack environment. They've done it. They really upped their game and with the integrations that they need to use to run it. So if you're a Microsoft security shop, then going with Microsoft Sentinel probably a very good idea for you. One, again, because the integrations are very, very simple and they're pretty easy. They're pretty easy to do. Compared towards if you want to bring, let's say, CrowdStrike onto your platform or SentinelOne, for example, towards Microsoft security platform. If you want to do that, it's a lot more complex. You have to build a lot more custom data connectors to do that. The initial standing up is quicker compared to an on-prem version. And using KQL as a query language is pretty simple. So if you know how to use SPL, understanding KQL is pretty easy. And KQL stands for Custom Querying Language, if I'm correct. So in my opinion, the issue with this is Microsoft doesn't have any best in breed tools. For example, what I mean by that is any tool it has is not the best in the market, right? Right. For example, Slack is better than Teams, in my opinion. It's more efficient, has less issues, it's less buggy, it's a lot easier to use and navigate around. But if I bought M360, right? No, M365, right, Court? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If I bought M365, right, and it came and Teams comes with it, I'm not gonna spend the extra $500,000 or whatever it is the case to actually have all my users have Slack. Some firms do, but not all of them, right? I already have Teams set on my platform, so I'm just gonna use it. It may not be the best, but it already comes with it, right? Same thing with PowerPoint, same thing with Excel, same thing with Word, right? Everything's already packaged together, so it's a lot more convenient and easier for me to just use their tool set. That's what Microsoft gets you, right? Because Microsoft Defender isn't the best endpoint EDR, XDR out there. CrowdStrike's a lot better than it, so it's SentinelOne. But normally it's a lot cheaper and a lot easier to just use it if I've already bought the actual package with it. So that's what Microsoft can get you. And there's a lot of different cost analysis you can do to see if it's best for your environment, but those are a couple of the things to look out for. See if any questions.
I actually do from Felicia said, would Microsoft Sentinel be the preference over Splunk if the company wants cloud?
That's a good question. I mean, if you're looking for, I mean, it's also going to depend what the Zach needs for. For example, I would ask them, if this with my potential client, why do you want to have a cloud environment? Is it going to be fully in cloud? Are we going to be hybrid? How much time and money are you willing to spend to migrate your servers from on-prem to the cloud, right? Those are some questions I would ask them. Because normally, if you're a large environment, that may take you 3 to 4 years to do, right? So normally, like, what most firms will have is they'll have an actual hybrid environment. So they'll either have an on-prem SIEM, like maybe Elastic or Splunk, and then they'll have a cloud native SIEM, right? So they may have LogRhythm, they may have LogScale, they might have Microsoft Sentinel, they may have Chronicle, and then they'll have different workloads inside of the different environments, right? So again, if they're using Microsoft security tools, they may just keep those logs inside of Microsoft Sentinel because it's a lot easier for them to use that, right? Compared to some of their other endpoint devices, they may just funnel that into Splunk. So that's one of the use cases they may have. It just all depends on what the firm wants to do, what their goals are actually. I hope that answers your question. Awesome. So these are some of the core architecture components of Sentinel. And again, Microsoft will handle the actual physical architecture or components, right? The servers, things of that nature, right? Because this is a cloud native SIEM. You're basically using this as a security as a service for software. But these are the 5 things you need to have to run Microsoft Sentinel and Azure. You need a subscription, you need a tenant, you need Azure Active Directory, you need Log Analyst Workspace, and you need a Microsoft Sentinel's Workspace. So let's break these 5 components down. So you will have the subscription. The subscription is, think of it like you have a subscription to Netflix, right? You're paying for that service to use Microsoft Sentinel. So there's a cost associated with that. You can have multiple subscriptions for your Azure account, right? And then you have a tenant. So a subscription will fit inside of a tenant, right? So tenant is basically, think of it like you rent out an apartment, right? You're in tenant towards that larger organization, right? So your organization may have multiple tenants, and they may have that because they may be merging, doing acquisitions, or they may have like a sister company, right? Or they may have a separate tenant for a separate department. It all just depends. So you may have a security tenant, and you may have an operations tenant to break your data across, right? The thing Quinn was mentioning earlier, for data compliance policies, right? You may have separate tenants, so your data doesn't mix and cross match. Then you have an Azure Active Directory. That's an IAM platform, basically, or identity access management. This basically controls who has access towards what resources inside of your Azure and Sentinel environments. And you need this to be able to break those apart, right? So your security team has access towards your security resources, and your operation team has access towards your operational resources. And then you have a log analytics workspace. The log analytics workspace is basically where data is initially sent to. So I like to think of this as the log analytics workspace is a log management platform, and then Microsoft Sentinel is the actual SIEM platform. Same thing like Splunk and Splunk Enterprise Security, or Splunk ES for sure. Okay, remember, if you ever watched any of my videos or spoken to me, Splunk in of itself is not a SIEM platform. Splunk has a SIEM component called Splunk Enterprise Security. Same thing with this for Azure, right? Log Analytics Workspace, it's not a SIEM platform. It's basically it's a log management platform. the SIEM component is called Microsoft Sentinel. So log analytics will take the logs and events from all different data sources. And then you can turn on the Microsoft Sentinel workspace or create one. And that will be your SIEM platform. So that's where all your detection rules are created. That's where your incidents will be created, your alerts will be created. That's where you can create playbooks, workbooks, logic acts, I believe. Because Sentinel is also a SOAR platform as well. Is anybody confused by this breakdown, especially for these last two?
Oh, good, Kenneth.
Got you. All right. Now it's time for the demo. But before the demo, I'm going to show you a quick example. Break it down again. So this is Lucio chart. It's free. I'm using the paid version, but the free version allows you to have a couple workspaces, basically. So let's say network logs. This. So and anybody knows me, knows I can't spell like a 5-year-old, but it's okay. Okay. So I want to break this down again just to make sure everyone fully understands. So here's how it normally works, right? You'll have network logs, you'll have IDS, IPS logs, and that stands for Intrusion Detection System and Intrusion Prevention System. You have CrowdStrike logs, and CrowdStrike is a market-leading XDR and NDR solution, or extended detection response platform, and endpoint detection response platform. So how it works is these logs will get sent towards a log analyst workspace. And then until you actually turn on the Microsoft Sentinel workspace, the log will sit here. And then the log will basically get sent towards your Microsoft Sentinel workspace, where you're able to actually create all the cool processes. So alerts, detection rules, workbooks. Yeah, so once you have the actual data and content, you're able to actually create the alerts, detection rules, and workbooks. But you're not able to do that until you have a log analyst workspace. These are where the logs are actually initially stored in Microsoft, I guess Azure technically. And then Sentinel's able to create the security content for that. Once you have the logs, you're able to create all the cool stuff with it. This is like a very simple breakdown of it. There's a lot more layers between it, but at the core, this is how it works.
I had two questions in the chat. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
Before you move on.
Defender would replace CrowdStrike as an XDR. It should. That's not always the case. Firms will have more than one, because they quote unquote think they add extra features towards it. A lot of the times they just get shiny object syndrome, right? So they have three Porsches and 2 Ferraris in their garage, but they just drive it to get groceries. That'll happen a lot of times inside of firms. So It should, but it isn't always DO. Is the manual part done at the process section, or is the process also automated? So for the data ingestion process, the initial setup can be manual or can be automated. So you can build a script to connect different servers or devices towards it. It all just depends on what you're trying to do. For like Windows and Linux servers, it's pretty easy to automate it. For other devices, it's not as easy, so it all just depends. And then you'll probably start to manually create some of these alerts and detection rules. And then you can start to automate the process once you get it down, and once you actually know what you want to automate. Any questions? All right, time for the demo then. So if you don't have an Azure account, it's pretty easy to create one. Just go to microsoftazure.com and create an account. I believe you get free services for like 30 days. You're able to use those, and then you have a lot of free services for life, and then a bunch more free for another year. So this is basically the GUI platform for it. There's also a command line feature you can use, navigate through. So here's the log analyst workspace. Here are my 2 workspaces, which host my data. Where's my agents? So I have my Windows computer connected towards it. Yep. So my actual hosts that I'm running my normal stuff on, I've connected it towards my Sentinel environment, and it's forwarding logs towards it. And then you have instructions on how to do it. It can be kind of tricky sometimes, especially for the lens part. But if you need help with that, just let us know. So these are where the logs are hosted. So we click on logs. You'll have my Microsoft Sentinel log because I turned on Sentinel. And you have the other logs for Azure activity, audit logs, heartbeat logs, sign-in logs, usage. Then to perform the really cool features on it for security purposes, we'll go to actual Sentinel. But remember, you have to have a logs analytics workspace to use Microsoft Sentinel. So this is my Microsoft Sentinel workspace. And here is my dashboard I have. It tells me how much data is getting ingested. And these are auto-populated. I didn't actually create this. It made it when I first spun it up, which is pretty cool. And so I'm going to quickly show you how to search some logs inside of Microsoft Sentinel. So the 2 tables I have are log management and the Microsoft Sentinel. And quick question, who here has KQL experience? Anybody?
So far, none.
Nobody? When I'm very disappointed in you, not acceptable. But for SPL experience, yeah, pretty similar to XPL. My opinion, if you know how to use SPL, learning this isn't that big of an issue, in my professional experience. Oh, does anybody have KQL experience? It's okay if you don't. Not too difficult to learn if you have SPL, but I'll show you around. So the table we will be searching, or I'll be searching technically, it's a security event. This hosts most of our Windows logs when we're ingesting Windows logs from any Windows system. And any alerts that we may generate from logs will get put here. So for example, that. So I generated. So I'm trying to search for some security events over the past 7 days. It's limited to only 10 events. So the hard part about this is like switching from SPL to KQL. They are different, even though they are similar. So my syntax may be off some of the times. It's kind of annoying, but you get used towards it. Generated, sending. We only want 10, so take 10. No, hit enter. So these are some of the security events that are coming from my Windows machine. So I want to get a deeper dive if I could. All right, security channel, level 8, event ID. So I could look up this event ID if I wasn't sure what it was. But it tells me here. Right, functional privileges assigned to new login. So I thought that was malicious. I could do a deeper dive and continue to search it. Or I could create an alert on this as well. And then if I didn't want to limit it to 10, I could limit it to 20. The way to do this in Splunk is slightly different, but the concept's exactly the same. So now I have 20 events here. Now let's say I want to summarize this. I think I summarize as the table version of, or think of summarize as a table version and Sentinel. For those of you familiar with SPO. Felicia, do the logs stay forever or do they erase after a certain period? Yes, they don't stay forever, Felicia. What is the default retention period? Well, for I guess hot storage, so the quickest storage period, it's about 30 days, I believe. Then for the full storage period, I think it's by default 180 days, and then I'll erase it. You can change that. It'll cost you more money, but you're able to do that if needed. What did I use to learn KQL? So I learned it at my job actually, from my clients. So they kind of said, "Ken, if you're doing Sentinel," and they kind of threw me in the deep end, and I had to swim or get kicked off their engagement. So I had to learn. But yeah, there's different data retention periods as well. And then again, for compliance purposes, you'll have to keep data stored for a certain amount of time. There's costs associated with that. So talk toward the admin or architect about that. So let's summarize. And search best practices still apply the same in Splunk like in Microsoft Sentinel. So inclusion is better than exclusion. right? Make your searches as specific as possible. Filter down earlier when needed. Oh, I have to add. Oh, that's right. I gotta change it. Hold on. So now let's say I want to find and summarize the account over the past 7 days for different event IDs and know which ones are the most common, which ones I should be on the lookout for. I could do it like this as well. And these are the top 10 ones. So if I wasn't sure what 4799 means, I could basically look this up online and then figure out what's going on with it. Why is it appearing in my environment so much? And I don't like how count has that little dash at the end. So count. So I'm gonna change the name of it. And now that's changed, I have to use a new naming for it. Now it's changed. So what I did up here is I just changed count equals count now. So now it's capital, and there's no little dash at the end. And but once I do that, I had to continuously use this new naming throughout the rest of my query. Same like in Splunk. Okay. Any questions about KQL at all? Any concerns? No. Okay. No worries. So now I'm going to create. Do I do an alert? Or do I do the summarize? I do summarize. Questions. Let's see. Oh, Corey. Oh, it's definitely a lot more complicated. I'm just doing very basic searches. But yeah, I would say pretty straightforward to use KQL.
Got one question. Is there a time where an event defined is created by the company, meaning it doesn't it exist PM Google to find?
I can clarify that. I was trying to type it really fast, y'all.
So it's
This is
okay.
Felicia. So when you mentioned about the event ID, and if you want to know what it means, you can drop down or you can Google it. I was wondering, is there a time would it be a company is like that event ID belongs to them, like how KQL belongs to Microsoft only? That was my concern since they created QKL and Azure, and you only can find that with those two together. That's what I was kind of asking.
Well, event IDs are unique towards Windows. They're just basically a code to identify certain events inside of Windows logs. So I can see event IDs inside of my Splunk instance as well.
Okay.
So they're not. I would say they're unique towards Windows events. But if you're able to ingest Windows logs inside of any different similar log management platform, you'll be able to see them.
So it wouldn't like go over into if it was AWS or Google, like these event IDs, like were you saying like they only belong to MS, to Microsoft?
Yeah, I would say they're unique towards Microsoft in the sense that they're
Okay.
attached towards Windows logs. But if you ingested this data inside of Splunk, Chronicle, Logscale, Elastic, it wouldn't matter. You'd still be able to see the Windows event ID.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Right. Now we're going to search usage. So now I'm pivoting. I'm searching the actual usage table. So usage table gives you a description, right? This is our data usage for each workspace. So I want to see how much data we're actually using from each workspace to get a better sense of which workspaces are being utilized the most, which is very important when you're doing infrastructure monitoring. This goes in heavy hand for costs, which is very important for most firms. This is one of the tables you would search inside of Sentinel. So now we're actually, let me take. Right. So these are some of the usage events I'm getting in. And I want to find how much data I'm actually using for it. So let's get started. And normally when I'm looking up a new table or a new event, or whatever the case may be, I just do a preliminary search and see what the data and logs actually look like to get a better sense of what I need to actually search for. Because I can't read mine, so I don't know everything yet. I wish I could though.
I got two questions. One referring to as you're doing your searches now, Corey had asked, when we are looking at these events, what are we looking for particularly?
That all depends on what your task is trying to find. So if your manager says, Corey, right? Courtney, is that the name you use? Yeah, Corey.
Corey.
So a manager's like, Corey, I want you to find all events related towards event ID 4672 and to create an alert on it. And you say, sure thing, boss, I can do that. Your job is to then find whatever tables have all those events, join them, union them, whatever the case may be, then create an alert on that. So what you would do is you would look for events that have that certain ID. And if you're, I'm going to assume you're in a security environment. So if you are, try to find malicious activity surrounding those events. Once you do that, you can further continue your investigation and find out what exactly is going on. You may find out that a user account has been compromised and they're running malicious activity inside of an environment based off of that event ID, right? And then from there, you're able to build a detection rule to stop it, alert the user, shut down their account temporarily to try to fix it, so on and so forth. It all literally all depends on what you're being tasked with to do. And then Courtney can probably speak towards that better than I can. I work on more of the architecture and engineering side now, but she still does the triage analyst work. Do you have anything to add, Courtney?
Yeah, typically like I know particularly when you mentioned about detection rules and stuff, like at my job, we often use as far as like YAR rules. So creating a YAR rule, pulling the string towards say for example, if there is a client coming in speaking towards like is that like a phishing simulation or a campaign, certain type of campaign that is going on, pulling those different resources towards those things. And then I know for the events, like we typically use CrowdStrike for our EDR.
Fancy.
And within our CrowdStrike, we're able to like pull through events, particularly looking at different IP addresses, or as well as different domains, searching to see whether things are pulling up successfully or whether different users are clicking on to certain websites that are malicious, those type of things.
It's odd. I just ran a search like.
Corey also had another question. I know this is Corey, this is more so looking at events through the Sentinel logs. But they were asking, do you have an example of what a cyber attack might look like using these event logs? Kenneth.
Why is this working? Example of cyber attack. Not in this environment. I would in my Splunk one. I can show you one of the alerts I created to detect when something malicious. Okay, I can explain after this real quick. Okay, let me break down this search and I'll do the explanation for Corey for one of the alerts that I have. Or I can actually demo it here again, it's fine. So the goal of this Corey is to create metrics or maybe create an alert, depending on what my boss wants me to do, for some of the metrics that are being created by each table. So this is a resource URL, which is important, so I know where it's coming from, the data type, security insights, and the bytes which I'm transferring to kilobytes. Well, project is the field comparison in Splunk. So I'm just pulling back these fields because that's all I want to be showed for my events. Think of extend in KQL as the eval command in Splunk. I'm able to create and manipulate fields using this. So I'm basically creating a new field called kbytes. I'm setting it equal towards the quantity times this amount, which will convert it towards kilobytes. So now we have a better sense of which tables are actually going to be the most populous one, which is the data type field. If I want to sort this by descending or descendant, I'm able to do that as well. But to answer Corey's question, all right. Let me, this will be the last thing I'll show you. We're coming up on time. Let's see. Okay. So this is one of the alerts that I created, and I made it into an incident, or it got turned into an incident. Can I exit out of this? I guess not. So this is one of the suspicious activities that I like to detect on my system for privilege exhalation. And this is the event code I was talking to you about a little bit earlier. It's 4672. And maybe somebody raising privileges inside of my system. Again, I'm the only person that has access towards my computer, a little by myself. So somebody other than me is doing this, then it may be something malicious I want to check out on. And I tell it to run, I want to say every day, you can be twice a day. And it fires off twice a day. There's a real name for it. Here's what I created. You set the real logic. If I want to modify this, I can. It's in settings, automate response. So if this was constantly being fired off in my environment and it was somebody other than me using this, then I might want to do extra research as to what's going on inside my environment. Because again, I'm the only person that has direct access towards my machine. So I should be the only user that gets flagged on this. This is happening. So it runs once a day, looks at data from the last 5 days, basically. And then if I want to do an automated response, I could send an email address towards me, shut down this computer. I don't want to do that because it's my computer or something else, right? It all just depends. So you can create different alerts. So you could create a honeypot, you can do a security onion, and then you could just funnel data towards this and then create different alerts on it, and then transfer those into actual incidents and respond on those. And then if you want to, you could create a Jira board to monitor and track it to try to make like a SOC, like a real SOC environment, and write a report on it basically. Which is something that we show our students how to actually do. Corey, you stay after I can answer your question in more detail. But does anybody have any other questions? Because that was a demo. I don't want to make it too complicated. I just want to show you basic understanding of how it works. Sentinel is very powerful, so there's a lot more you can do with it. But I want to show you a couple quick examples of what you can actually do with Sentinel. And I'm just using this on one machine. If I want to add different devices, I could use Cloud Defender to install Cloud Defender at one of my machines, and for those logs as well, use syslog, use Linux. There's a lot of cool things you can do with Sentinel. But that's all I had for today. Did anybody have any questions before we get into Q&A? If not, let me stop recording, then we can get to the Q&A session.